What is up, guys? It's John back with another video. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. For those of you who haven't been paying attention, Team USA is 2-0 in the World Baseball Classic at the time that I am recording this video. They beat the crap out of Great Britain last night. Absolutely rolling. The boys are buzzing. Get hyped, people. So just like last week, I'm going to touch upon 3 articles that I wrote this past week as opposed to 4. That's just the way things panned out, but in the future, I might go back to the 4 and just kind of bounce between 4 and 3. So yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Let's get into it. And remember that the links to these Substack articles are going to be in the description below the video. So please enjoy and stay tuned. Let's get into it. So the first piece I want to talk about is one I wrote about 2 iconic dresses that were designed by Gianni Versace and his sister Donatella Versace that defined fashion culture in the 1990s and 2000s. Let's start with Elizabeth Hurley in 1994. English actress Elizabeth Hurley, who was relatively unknown in 1994, wore a daring black Versace dress to the film premiere in London of 4 Weddings and a Funeral with her boyfriend Hugh Grant, who starred in the movie. Because Hurley was largely unknown, she was rejected by multiple fashion houses before Versace agreed to lend her a dress for the premiere. Hurley's dress featured gold safety pins and a revealing cut, which was inspired by the neo-punk aesthetic as well as the traditional Indian sari. Hurley's look on the red carpet instantly drew the attention of the world, both turning her into a star overnight as well as increasing the visibility of Versace on a global stage. Media coverage the next day focused more on Hurley's dress than the premiere itself, which tells you just how revolutionary it was. Now let's fast forward to 1997. That year, Gianni Versace was murdered outside of his Miami home by serial killer Andrew Cunanan. After his death, his sister Donatella Versace became the brand's creative director. Donatella initially faced a lot of criticism and doubt about whether or not she could live up to her brother's legacy. It was in 1999, however, that Donatella had the idea that would change Versace forever. That year, Donatella designed a sheer tropical print gown with a very deep neckline that was lined with citron at the waist. Runway model Amber Valletta debuted the dress, and then Donatella wore it to the Met Gala in 1999. It was in the year 2000, however, that the dress would become a global sensation. That year, actress turned pop singer Jennifer Lopez wore the dress to the 42nd Grammy Awards. The revealing look made Lopez the center of attention at music's biggest night. Within 24 hours of the Grammys, images of Lopez in the dress were downloaded over 640,000 times from the Grammys website. According to Google executive Eric Schmidt, the overwhelming demand to see the photos inspired the creation of Google Images in 2001. Within a 6-year period under 2 completely different creative directors, Versace was responsible for making 2 of the most famous dresses of all time. Both dresses dominated global media attention and served as defining moments in popular culture. The next piece I want to talk about is one I wrote about the 1969 Chappaquiddick incident involving U.S. Senator Ted Kennedy and 28-year-old Mary Jo Kopechne. The incident occurred on Chappaquiddick Island to the east of Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts. On the night of July 18th into July 19th, 1969, Ted Kennedy drove his car into a pond on Chappaquiddick Island with Mary Jo Kopechne as his passenger. The car was submerged in about 6 to 8 feet of water in Pucha Pond, and Kopechne was unable to escape from the submerged vehicle and died at the age of 28. Senator Kennedy escaped but failed to report the incident to authorities, waiting roughly 10 hours before he notified any law enforcement. A judicial inquiry later determined that Kennedy was reckless or negligent in his operation of the vehicle, but he was not indicted on more serious charges, to the shock of the nation. The event became one of the more enduring political scandals of the late 1960s in the United States, and Chappaquiddick has since become synonymous with political scandal and cover-up. The incident highlighted the power and influence of the Kennedy political dynasty, raising questions about accountability and privilege in American politics. Ted Kennedy remained a U.S. Senator until his death in 2009. The last piece I want to talk about is one I wrote about my favorite band of all time, Pink Floyd, visiting the most influential band of all time, the Beatles, during a recording session in 1967 at EMI Recording Studios, today known as Abbey Road Studios. At the time, the Beatles were the biggest band in the world and were working on their groundbreaking album, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Pink Floyd, still a relatively unknown band in the underground London psychedelic music scene, were recording their debut album, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn, in the next room over. One night, Pink Floyd finished their recording for that day and learned that the Beatles had just arrived to begin their night of recording at Abbey Road Studios. The Beatles were their idols, just like they were everybody's idols. Every single band in the world wanted to be them. Therefore, Pink Floyd begged their producer to try to get them the opportunity to sit in the control room and watch the Fab Four go to work. To their luck, Beatles producer George Martin allowed Pink Floyd to sit in the control room while the Beatles worked on piano overdubs on the song Lovely Rita. For the babyface members of Pink Floyd, the session revealed the meticulous and experimental techniques that the Beatles used to create their sound. Nobody in EMI recording studios that night realized that the moment that Pink Floyd sat in on a recording session of the Beatles symbolized the passing of the torch from the Beatles to Pink Floyd as the progenitors of British psychedelic rock. The moment is now remembered as a rare intersection of two of the greatest bands in the history of rock and roll. For this week's song recommendation, I recommend the song Hearts and Bones, which is the title track off of Paul Simon's sixth studio album from 1983. For this week's album recommendation, I recommend Live at the Regal, which is a 1965 live album by blues guitarist and singer B.B. King. And lastly, for this week's film recommendation, I recommend Rushmore, which is a 1998 comedy film directed by Wes Anderson. So that's all I have for today's video. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed these stories and I hope you like my recommendations. Make sure to tune in to the World Baseball Classic. Team USA is rolling 2-0. Play Mexico Monday night at 8 o'clock on Fox. Paul Skeens on the bump. Let's get after it. The links to the articles that I discussed will be in the description below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and please stay tuned for the journey to come. Thank you.